Everybody hated learning grammar in school, myself included. But of course, it's one of these fundamental things that was actually important that we could have learned in school, but likely did not. So I first want to distinguish between the two types of grammar. There is general grammar, the topic of this video, and special grammar. General grammar is more concerned with the relationship between words and reality, whereas the special or traditional or classical grammar is more concerned with words and their relation to words in a specific language. So general grammar, of course, is concerned with no specific language, whereas this special grammar is concerned with English, French, Latin, etc. General grammar is more philosophical because it relates to metaphysics and ontology. So in this lecture, we're going to skip this traditional classical logic that you learn in school. We're going to get more into the philosophy of grammar, which is more so related to the topic of this playlist. So first we're going to break down general grammar, so it can be broken down quite nicely and make it easier to understand. And eventually we're going to relate it to logic at the end of this video. Again, this is serving as a foundation. I promise by the end of this video, you're going to learn something new about grammar that you did not know before and that you did not learn in school. I guarantee it. Let's break general grammar down into two major categories. These include categorematic words as well as syncategorematic words. Categorematic words are standalone. They convey semantic meaning by themselves independently in a sentence. They actually provide the meaning of the sentence itself. They are bringing this connection to reality to the sentence. These are the meaningful units of a sentence, right? So these are your nouns, your adverbs, your verbs, your adjectives, etc. In the sentence, the cat sat and quietly are all categorematic words because they all bring a unique meaning to that short sentence. So of course, categorematic words are concerned with words that mean something, right? Of course, we can bring it back to Aristotle's 10 categories of being, which we covered in the last video, and I strongly urge you to go check that out because we're going to go a little less in depth than we did in that video here. We're going to break this down into two general categories though. So we'll remember that we had substantives and we had attributives. Let's first start with substantives. Simply, these are words that represent substance. If it exists in itself, it's a substantive. If it exists in another, it's an attributive. So the substantives includes things like nouns and pronouns. Here this represents concrete substances or abstractions. And if we think back to the first video in this playlist on our relationship to language and reality, we know that this represents things like individuals and species as well as genus, right? So looking at these categories, whether they become more specific or more general is what we're talking about with species and genus. I strongly urge you to go listen to that video as well. And so when you get into concept formation, what fits into these groups and categories of genus and species falls under this category. And so interestingly, this is the category that increases as society advances. As we gain more comfort, we are able to spend more time categorizing and subcategorizing things in more specific or more general nature, which makes us seem more advanced and intelligent just because we can categorize things more in depth. So if you think of science, for example, we have this whole animal naming system, considering Latin words, of course, usually. So we can relate this really well to science, right? Science is more advanced than ever, but we just have more categories and subcategories than ever. We categorize animals and insects very, very specifically, even down to microbes and even the viruses, structures of the cell, atoms, chemicals, molecules, right? So we're really categorizing things very, very specific. And of course, this comes with broader categories as well. And so as we don't have to worry about survival so much, we entertain ourselves in creating more and more substantives so we become more and more specific in our language. Of course, this is helpful in a way, not necessarily that the modern human is better off than the primitive human. I'm sure there's a great argument that can be made there, which we talk a little bit about here. But things are quite cushy now, and so we spend a lot of time creating these substantives now, especially concerning science, right, where we create all these new phenomenon in reality. Of course, we need to make sure that they depict something in reality, but that's a whole other question. All right, next we have the attributives. This, of course, represents 9 out of the 10 categories. Only one category falls under the substantives, and that is substances. Under attributives, we have things like quality, quantity, right, relating to measurement. We have time, any temporal aspects. we have position, posture, etc. And so let's just break this down a little bit further to make it a little easier to understand. Primary attributives are concerned with verbs, verbals, and adjectives because they are directly connected to the substantives, whereas secondary attributives are connected to a primary attributive, which is connected to a substantive. So of course it's considered secondary because it has to take another step in its connection, its relationship to a substance. And so the very important thing to understand with categorematic words is that they carry their own semantic meaning. This is the easiest way to sort of distinguish. If you read a sentence, you think this word is bringing meaning, right? It's sort of conveying some sort of reality, then it must be a categorematic word. So of course, syncategorematic words do not convey any sort of semantic meaning. They have no real relationship to reality per se, and they are of course more linguistic. Now, syncategorematic words are used to modify and connect the categorematic words in a sentence. And so a syncategorematic word serves as the structural or relational role in a sentence, right? These are the grammatical elements. And so you could think of these words as grammatical concrete, right? This is what provides the structure, as I just mentioned, to the sentence. It kind of glues the sentence together. This is important in making sense of words and sentences, right? In sort of conveying that reality, you could speak in sort of caveman tongue where you're just describing objects. And so these syncategorematic words are really allowing it to flow a little bit better and provide more sense to the sentences. And so in the sentence, the cat sat quietly, the is the syncategorematic word here, as it defines which cat we're talking about. Of course, we can see that the doesn't carry any sort of semantical meaning, but it carries a sort of specificity within the sentence itself. Let's break this down a little bit further. First, we have the definitives. And so the definitives are associated to one word. And so this includes something like articles, like the or a. This also includes pronominals like it, they, but this only works when they're placeholders and they don't have specific reference. We also have connectives, and these are associated to multiple words, as the name suggests. This includes things like prepositions, which may be in or on, and these connect words. We also have things like conjunctions, like and or but, which connect sentences together. We also have things like auxiliaries, and of course these are things like is or have. And so these express tense, aspect, or voice. And they can also form questioning or negations. We also have the pure copula, and these connect subject and predicate. So you might be able to group both of these under connectives. We'll just have them stand alone here. But really, the pure copula is the most important sort of syncategorematic word or in relationship to logic. And so here we're trying to connect sort of the subject of the sentence to the subject complement. Typically, this denotes a state or an attribute of the subject. Of course, this doesn't carry any semantic meaning on its own, but it sort of provides that relationship between the subject and the complement. And so in English, the most common pure copula is to be. So things like am, is, are, was, were, etc. So of course, in logic, we're concerned with the relationship between these entities or properties, right, and the differences therein. So the pure copula helps us express these propositions or these predicate logical statements. And of course, this is foundational to reasoning and argumentation, and thus the discussion of logic. The copula allows us to establish identity, equality, or attributions so we can make meaningful assertions about the world and our reality. And so let's look at an example. If you take the proposition that Socrates is mortal, the pure copula in this case would be is. So we can see how the copula establishes a relationship between the subject, Socrates, and the predicate, which would be mortal in this case, and establishes a meaningful relationship within that sentence. So of course you can see how this is extremely important when we're making propositions and logical statements, because the pure copula, in this case, if we were to change it to was, and we were to say that Socrates was mortal, this changes the entire assertion of that statement, right? The relationship now between Socrates and mortality has completely changed now that the pure copula has changed. So even though syncategorematic words don't necessarily convey semantic meaning on their own, they're still very, very important when it comes to describing reality. So what is the functions of grammar? And so in essence, what we're trying to do is establish laws for relating these symbols to express thought, right? We want our thoughts to align with reality especially if you're taking a rationalism approach. When you're talking about reasoning and logic, it's great if the logic makes sense in your head, but if it has no relationship to reality, then the logic serves absolutely no purpose. And so here we can think of sentences as relationships of ideas. And so categorematic words are what are related. And syncategorematic words are the means of relating them together. And so of course, if it's not obvious by now, language is so fundamentally important to logic and reasoning, which is important for any sort of epistemological view. I don't care if you're an empiricist or a rationalist. There is some sort of inference that is being made to sort of convey a truth about reality. Language always matters. And so we have to come back to this foundation to ensure that when we're working from the ground up, that our propositions convey some sort of reality. Of course, you can go beyond that to ensure that the words that we're using convey some sort of reality as well. This is very important in science, how we make up all of these words like atoms, genes, viruses, cell structures, etc. We need to have some sort of evidence that we're actually conveying a reality when we use these words. And so that's why people enjoy empiricism so much, but then using technology begs all sorts of questions and is often quite circular in nature. It doesn't employ the scientific method in a more truthful fashion. And so that's why getting back to language is so important, even beyond grammar, in simple definitions of words, right? That's why you can literally look at the meaning of categorematic words to sort of understand, do they express a reality? And then you can look at the sentence and say, okay, well, does this sentence convey some sort of reality? Especially when you're trying to make causal inferences, right? People want to say that genetics are the cause of a disease. Well, that begs all sorts of questions about what genetics is, right? And so even a geneticist will tell you that we don't know jack shit about genetics. So really, we need to get back to the fundamentals here. All right, and if you found this mini lecture insightful, informative, or you enjoyed it, or you hated it, give us a like, comment, share, subscribe. You know how to help support us. Sharing is the best way, of course. There are links if you want to go above and beyond. Remember, we're giving away the Structure of Scientific Revolutions at 1,000 subscribers. So make sure you subscribe. If your subscribers are private, make sure you send me a message on Instagram telling me that you're subscribed to enter the giveaway. You still have some time. Make sure you tell your friends to come subscribe over here, and we'll get the word out a little bit more. I know we're really going over some basic stuff. You may seem like this is also very, very obvious, and I certainly agree, but the state of the world necessitates these sort of discussions, and so that's why we're going over the absolute basics. Sometimes it's important to build from the foundation up, especially since a lot of us who went to public school received no education. We were taught only what to think and not necessarily how to think. Some of us may be fortunate enough to think for ourselves now in this day and age, which is a rare phenomenon. But that's why we're building from the foundation up. It's going to be very interesting when we start learning from the ground up with mathematics. I'm sure we can make all sorts of assumptions about our knowledge states at that point and maybe jump to the more university level, hopefully. We'll see. But for now, hope you guys enjoyed this, and take care.